With headlines of big business layoffs at UPS and Amazon, I thought it was only fitting to talk about unemployment this week. We're still missing unemployment data from the government since it's shut down and the BLS isn't releasing any until they reopen. So here is the unemployment rate with the Chicago Fed nowcasts overlaid. Shout out to Guy Berger over at the Burning Glass Institute, or Econ Berger online. He compiled this rate, but this is the last 3 years of unemployment with the extension looking at 4.3% right now. But I want to posit first that this rate is misleading, and I don't think many people understand why it's misleading. So let's talk about that first. What do I mean by the real unemployment rate? I'm mostly talking about this chart of the US unemployment rate in purple and the U6 unemployment rate in orange. See, to be unemployed in America, and I don't mean colloquially unemployed, meaning you don't got a job. What I mean is unemployment by government definition. So to be unemployed, to fit in this purple line, this 4.3% rate of the workforce, you have to fit very certain criteria. You must not work at all. And I mean, 1 single hour of work per week qualifies you as employed. You must not be in any training or any sort of education. So taking classes at a night school to reskill while you look for work counts as employed. You must be actively looking for work. So all the people who were trying to apply for months and ended up falling out of the workforce, they ended up just stopped looking, they've given up, those people are not counted as unemployed. They're counted as not in the labor force. And so they don't count toward that purple line. Now, when you take all those people back in, including people who are involuntarily experiencing part-time employment. So what I mean by this is they want a full-time job. They're looking for full-time work, but they can only find a part-time job. And for many of these people, that part-time job is gig work. It's Uber, DoorDash, whatever. And I know that it skews this statistic. When we look at the U6 rate, you can see it's at 8%. It's almost double the headline U3 unemployment rate is. So let's talk a little bit of data around this. What's going on right now? Well, so flashback to the Chicago Nowcast. They believe that we're trending up. Well, we've got other data. Here's Morning Consult, who says that we are up but trending down on the month. Okay. Morning Consult's data might be iffy. I don't know. Here's ADP, says we added 42,000 jobs in October. But when you look at the data, it's all big companies who don't employ most of the people. Most people in America are employed by mid-sized and small companies. But those companies are not hiring right now, but by and large, they are getting rid of people. And the large companies, despite the headline layoffs, are the ones eating up all the employees. I'll give you a hint. Those large companies are all healthcare companies, and they're providing low-paying healthcare jobs. Here's in New York. And the last 5 years, we can see, bottom right of this chart, highest on headcount growth and lowest on wage growth, healthcare jobs. All the jobs are healthcare jobs. I talked about this in my newsletter last week. Back to the unemployment rate. So we're looking at this U6 rate, and we've got a problem. 8% is unacceptable. That is incredible levels that we have not seen since the recovery slope from 2008. In fact, these are rates above any of the other good times we've had. I want to quickly talk about this group of people, the involuntary part-time workers, because I feel like a lot of the discussion around unemployment is focused on this binary, that you are a lazy bum sitting on the couch or you have a job. And I don't think that that's accurate for most people who are experiencing some level of unemployment, because there's an availability of cheap, easy to get jobs that are absolutely very flexible and, to their credit, pay you okay depending on where you live and how well you game their system. So for a lot of workers, doing Uber while you look for work and wait for callbacks from employers or whoever just makes a lot of sense. And so let's take a look at this chart. This is the U3 unemployment rate. So this is our headline unemployment rate in green. And in blue here are our involuntarily part-time employees. Almost 3% of the workforce is involuntarily part-time, and it's rising. Take a look at this. This is back from Morning Consult again. On this chart, we're seeing the share of employed US adults actively applying for new positions. So these are people who have jobs that are looking for new work. And by and large, people who fit this category are people, especially right now in our low fire environment that is rapidly changing into a somewhat fire. In that environment, if you're looking for work, by and large, it means that you have one of these crummy part-time jobs and you want a full-time job. You're part of this involuntary part-time group. And what we're seeing is a divergence between their household income rates. So we're seeing a fall in that pink line, the high earners above $100,000 a year. If your household's making that much, then you're applying less to other jobs. You're not making those applications like you were the last couple of months and the last year. On the flip side, everybody else is rising. Everybody else is looking for new work. So we're seeing a rise in the amount of these involuntarily unemployed people, and they are continuously looking for and wanting new work, but only at the low end in terms of income. The higher income people not experiencing this, at least in their households. So we've got two more charts to look at. The first is this transition rate into involuntary part-time work. What we're seeing here is an uptick in the amount of people transitioning into part-time work from full-time work. And so this is this group of people who are getting laid off from their jobs and are now driving for Uber and DoorDash. We're seeing a fall in this rate at the same time from unemployment and from people staying in their part-time role, part-time to part-time from survey to survey. A rise in people going to involuntary part-time work from full-time work is a bad thing. From unemployment into involuntary part-time work falling is also a bad thing because it means that unemployed people, by and large, are skipping out on getting some of these gigs now. And that may be a contribution of our larger labor pool falling. I wonder what would cause the labor pool to fall. Here's the other chart. This is people transitioning out of involuntary part-time work. So when they do find a job, where are they going? Well, from survey to survey, they're sticking through it. We're seeing a rise in people staying in their roles. And then we're seeing a subsequent fall in people moving to full-time work. They're not getting out of this. Right? Rapidly from full-time work, they're going into this category. And from this category, they're not finding new full-time work. This means that our labor force is widely not reskilling as it should be, largely getting stuck in these part-time loops. If you're driving for Uber and DoorDash all day and you have to do it all day in order to make a salary replacement, then you're not sitting around applying to jobs and you're stuck in this loop. To note at the bottom, we're still seeing a stagnation and even a lowering in people moving out of the labor force. So I'm not so worried about people just quitting and giving up altogether, except for young people. Gen Z is absolutely cooked in this regard. And I see a lot of Gen Z, especially young men who are struggling in the labor force, falling out of it, sitting on Robinhood and DraftKings gambling all day. And I worry about them. So what does this all mean for the Fed? Well, the labor market is getting worse. All of these charts have told us that things are deteriorating, and they're deteriorating at a faster rate than the headline unemployment rate shows. But the Fed sees a lot of this data too. They understand where we're going. So they will likely continue to cut rates. Don't be alarmed by all the sudden headlines about a December rate cut being off the table. Of course, Powell says stuff like that. Powell always has to hedge his language. There is no risk-free path forward. This was a rate management cut. Nothing is set in stone. But the labor market is deteriorating, and the Fed finds the labor market more important than inflation. They've got two tools: create liquidity, lower interest rates. Creating liquidity won't necessarily help businesses, so they're just going to have to lower interest rates. They're going to have to make prime borrowing easier. And when they do this, they're going to stimulate some job growth. This means that regardless of how bad inflation gets, they're basically going to have to lower rates in December. Now, after that, I will give them a pause if they seek a pause, but I still see that before May 2026, we'll have 3 more rate cuts from here. One in December, and then the timeline on the next 2, let's wait until December to figure that one out. But make no mistake here, the Fed still has to lower rates. Yield curve control doesn't care what the labor market needs, and they will keep those rates going down. They have to, especially while asset prices are high. The economy is largely driven by consumption, and consumption is largely driven by the top 10% of earners. The top 10% of earners have their consumption habits molded by the availability of asset wealth. If the stock market is high, then high earners feel very wealthy. If the stock market is low, they feel very poor and they stop spending. Since the stock market has continued on a run, and I don't mean thinking about this in 6-month terms, but the last 5 years of performance change how you feel about your portfolio when you're one of these top 10% earners. So where does unemployment go from here? I don't think the Fed rate cuts are going to fix it. I think it's probably going to get worse. And I don't mean this out of some doomer viewpoint of the economy. I'm actually fairly bullish on the economy, but not for the subprime, not for the lower class, not for anyone with financial issues. These people are increasingly getting screwed by the economy and the way the system works. It is not built for them. It is designed to crush them, and they are increasingly being crushed. They are not counted properly in the unemployment rates. But there is no inequality trade. As my best friend very handedly reminded me when I've been searching for this for quite some time, this inequality trade. How can I find a way to bet on things getting worse in this way? The bifurcating economy, the K-shape, as we've been calling it. How do you bet on that? The only answer you can come to is the stock market. It has to be this way because inequality is priced in. We are in a world where there isn't someone who will take the counter bet to the rich get poorer and the poor get richer. And while the rich get richer, the economy can chug along. So all of this brings us back to this chart, the unemployment rate, the headline. The real rate's worse. Even above the U6 rate, we can consider that it's probably closer to 10%. Among Gen Z, we're considering that 10% of Gen Z fits this traditional unemployment rate, U6. And then 10% of Gen Z are NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. They're doing nothing. The boomers would say they're sitting on the couch. This group of people is not counted at all and skews these statistics. I worry that we're not counting them correctly. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a way to profit from this either. For the average person, it just sucks. And hey, I'm not trying to be a complete doomer, but we need to look at the facts as they are and understand the definitions as they shape our view of stats and the economy, so that when we're trading and acting, we're doing so on the right data and seeing the right signals and not listening to the noise. Hey, if you want more signal and less noise, check out my newsletter, link down in the description. I publish once a week, every Sunday, straight to your inbox. If you are having a hard time finding them, the best thing you can do for me is take that email from your promotions tab and move it into the primary inbox. Then you'll always get my newsletters. They'll ping you every time, and they will stop burying them amongst all the spam that you don't want to read. Hey, if you found this useful, you thought I learned something today, or I changed your perspective of the world, then consider giving a like to this video and subscribing to my channel. It would really help me out. I'm very new here on YouTube. This is like my 4th video, and I'm trying to produce something every week so that I can keep the conversation going and build new strands of ideas that we're going to continue to cover as we move on here. So thank you very much for being here. See you next week.